In my family, there's a quirky tale involving my dad, his siblings, and a set of poorly made clay pots. It all started when my Aunt Margaret, the oldest sister, received these 4 mismatched pots as a wedding gift from an acquaintance. They were obviously the product of an amateur pottery class, with each pot looking vastly different from the others. Fast forward 15 years, and it's my parents' wedding day. Aunt Margaret, along with the rest of the family, attends the ceremony and reception without any issues. The following week, as my parents begin unwrapping their wedding gifts, they stumble upon a worn-out cardboard box. It had been resealed by Aunt Margaret using new tape, but the remnants of the old tape were still visible. Curiosity piqued. My dad opens the box to find the very same 4 pots that Aunt Margaret had received on her own wedding day, proof that they were indeed meant for her lies at the bottom of the box, a wedding card addressed to Margaret. This discovery infuriates my dad, but instead of expressing his anger directly, he decides to hatch a long-term plan. With Christmas on the horizon, he wraps the pots back in the same box, making sure to include the original wedding card addressed to Aunt Margaret. He then writes another card addressed to one of his siblings, explaining the scheme. Passing the gift to the youngest sibling, my dad instructs her to keep the pots until the following Christmas, making sure they are visible when unwrapped. The note also advises her to leave the wedding card in the box, hidden from view. The cycle continues for 9 years, with each sibling passing the gift and the accompanying note to the next in line, until it finally reaches Aunt Margaret. The clever twist is that the second-to-last sibling is instructed not to give my aunt the letter written by my dad. After nearly a decade of anticipation, the moment arrives. All of my dad's siblings gather together as Aunt Margaret opens the familiar box, revealing the pots that have made their way through the family. It's at this point that she notices the still intact note inside the box. As her jaw drops in surprise, the ground registers a tremor of laughter from the entire family. Instead of erupting in rage, Aunt Margaret, being the good-humored Australian she is, joins in the laughter. The pots are finally separated, with one going to my dad, another to Aunt Margaret, one to my grandparents, and the final one becoming the cherished trophy of our annual cricket game. Unfortunately, the trophy met its demise when a rogue ball shattered it during one of the games, leaving it as a half-trophy. And so, this delightful tale of the traveling pots and the ingenious plan behind them became a cherished memory within our family. It serves as a testament to the Australian sense of humor and the lasting bonds of our kinship. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as we have. In 2015, when I was just 6 years old, my family decided to move to a bigger and better house across the street from our old one in Denmark. The new house was newly built on land that we had purchased from our neighbors who owned a farm. As the construction was progressing, my family and I were at the house one day, exploring the freshly laid flooring and imagining how the walls would soon be erected. My dad had the idea of making it a fun weekend by cycling around on the floor, so we brought our bikes over. I was especially excited because my 6th birthday gift was my very first bicycle, which I treasured immensely. Learning to ride it was a bit challenging, but I loved it nonetheless. As we began biking around the floor, I had a great time trying to avoid steering onto the sand below, which my imaginative 6-year-old mind turned into lava. Initially, everything was going well. We were happily riding around, as children often do when they're having fun. However, our noise caught the attention of a family down the street, and that's when the encounter with the entitled mother, E.M., and her young kid, N.K., began. E.M. approached my dad with a typical Karen-like tone, saying, "Hi, excuse me." My dad, who was supervising us to ensure our safety, turned around and greeted her, asking how he could help. E.M. started complaining about our noise, claiming they were trying to enjoy the nice weather outside, which, to her credit, was indeed lovely that day. My dad calmly explained that we were just kids having fun, riding our bikes and playing. However, E.M. was not satisfied and demanded that we lower our volume. My dad called us over and asked us to try and be a little quieter, although I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. I did my best to comply, even though I struggled with it. Just as my brothers and I turned around to continue riding, N.K. spoke up and said, "Mommy, "It's not a big deal." EM glanced at him, then at my dad, and audaciously asked, "Can my son have your bike? He wants to ride around here too." My dad, slightly perplexed, remained composed and explained that we were using our bikes and that NK could join if he had his own. NK, sensing his mother's unreasonable request, pleaded for her to let it go and ask if they could return home. However, EM insisted that NK needed a bike right away and that it had to be one of ours. Intrigued by our cycling, NK stepped onto the floor to get a better view, but unfortunately he was barefoot and the concrete had been heated by the sun all day, causing him to burn his feet. My two older brothers rushed over to check if NK was all right, and I followed suit, although I couldn't do much. NK was on the verge of tears due to the pain from stepping on the scorching concrete. EM seized this opportunity and demanded that we now give one of our bikes to her son. However, NK, helped by my brothers, managed to stand up and asked his mom if they could just leave. EM, still upset that her son had been hurt, made one last attempt to get a bike from us. However, NK tugged on her dress and begged her to go back home. Finally, relenting, EM listened to her son and left. My brothers and I continued riding our bikes, and my dad kept a watchful eye on us. Besides the brief encounter with EM, it was an incredibly enjoyable experience to cycle around our future home with its unfinished walls. I would definitely rate it 10 out of 10 and recommend it to others. Our neighbors who live in the same house as us have a 3-year-old son, while my spouse and I own 3 indoor cats. One day, the father knocked on our door, expressing that his son had developed a fondness for cats. He asked if it would be possible for his son to see our cats. Despite some reservations, we decided to let them in. However, it quickly became apparent that the young boy was quite rough with animals, and his father made no effort to intervene as he chased our cats, screeched at them, pulled their tails, and even threw hard toys at them. Needless to say, we were not pleased with the situation. The very next evening, at the same time, the father and son returned to our doorstep. The father demanded that his son be allowed to visit the meows again. This time, my husband answered the door and was taken aback by their unexpected request. Caught off guard, he reluctantly let them inside once more. The same scenario played out, with the boy screeching and chasing our frightened cats for a solid half hour. On the third day, just as we sat down for dinner, the father knocked on our door again. He informed us that it was his son's bedtime and that he was ready to play with his beloved meows. I kindly but firmly explained that we were in the middle of dinner and couldn't accommodate their request for a daily play day. I mentioned that our cats were not comfortable with this arrangement, particularly since they were not accustomed to children and one of them was blind. I emphasized that the animals found the constant commotion distressing, and my husband and I treasured our evenings together as a time to unwind and enjoy a meal in peace. In response to our refusal, the next 2 hours were filled with the sounds of the child screaming relentlessly, demanding to see his cherished meows. Curious knocking followed, and we reluctantly opened the door to find our neighbor, seething with anger, pointing at his son's tear-streaked face. He yelled at us, blaming us for his son's sadness and urging us to consider the consequences of our decisions on others. He insisted that his son couldn't sleep without seeing his beloved meows. Yes, he continued to use that term along with the possessive adjective. In an attempt to resolve the issue in a civilized manner, I remained calm and explained that we never intended for our cats to become part of his son's bedtime ritual. I emphasized that it was unreasonable to expect us to adhere to a daily schedule and that the well-being of our cats should be taken into consideration. However, our attempts to reason were futile, as we were quickly labeled as child haters. 2 days later, our landlord contacted us, reminding us not to let our cats roam in the hallway due to the neighbor's child being allergic to cats. This incident took place nearly 6 years ago when I had just turned 20. At the time, I was a college student who occasionally worked as a babysitter. It wasn't a serious job, and I charged very little, but I had a knack for taking care of children, and parents appreciated my skills. Being my first job, I took pride in it. During a vacation, I went to the mall with 3 of my friends to catch a screening of Spider-Man: Homecoming. Arriving early, we decided to make a quick stop at a toy store so one of my friends could buy a birthday gift for his cousin. Nearby, there was a candy kiosk, and since I wanted some treats for the movie, I told my friends to go ahead without me, promising to meet them inside the store later. While purchasing candy, the store was offering samples of a new product, a chocolate stick resembling Pocky but thicker. I received one for free and left the kiosk. Taking a few bites, I headed back to the store to meet up with my friends. As I strolled through the doll aisle, I passed by a little girl, around 7 or 8 years old, accompanied by her mother Em. Momentarily, I lowered my hand holding the chocolate. Suddenly, the girl approached me, swiftly snatched the candy from my hand, and promptly shoved the broken piece into her mouth. Naturally surprised, I blurted out a quick "what the hell," while being mindful not to swear around kids. This caught the attention of Em. I explained the situation to her, and to my absolute shock at the time, the mother seemed initially angry at her daughter, demanding that she apologize to me. However, the girl began making excuses, claiming hunger and the proximity of the chocolate, insisting she wanted it more than I did, and she believed she had nothing to apologize for. As she continued to defend herself to her mother, Em uttered something along the lines of, "I know, honey, but we don't want the lady to call security now, do we?" "Wait, what?" Em then turned her attention back to me, stating, "I mean, really, my daughter is only 8 years old. You're a grown woman. You shouldn't be making such a fuss over chocolate." I pointed out that if they wanted candy, they could have easily gotten some for free at the kiosk. There was no need for her daughter to take mine. Em continued to defend her daughter, suggesting that I just get more chocolate myself. I was furious, but I didn't want the situation to escalate. Strangely enough, I still hoped the girl would grasp why it was wrong to take someone else's food. So I said, "Ma'am, I'm trying really hard to be patient here. I work as a nanny, but how can it possibly be acceptable for your daughter to steal candy from a complete stranger like that?" Before I knew it, a burning sensation spread across my face, and I felt the imprint of a large hand. Em's rings had nearly broken my skin. She screamed at me, but I was too stunned to pay attention. One of my friends overheard the commotion and came over to see what was happening. I informed him that Em had slapped me, prompting him to call security. Before they could arrive, Em warned her daughter not to say a word to them. My friend and I exchanged glances, silently agreeing that we would be better parents in the future. Soon enough, the security officers arrived and escorted Em and her daughter out of the store. I later discovered that they had been banned from the toy store as a result, which was more than satisfactory to me. I ended up purchasing more chocolate sticks. I sincerely hope that the child has grown up to be fine and learned the importance of respecting others' belongings. As someone deeply involved in the farming and agriculture community, I find myself connected to various farm-related groups. Earlier this morning, I stumbled upon a post that caught my attention and sparked some thoughts. The post read as follows. "Today, we traveled 9 hours to visit some of my husband's friends in Kentucky. Our young son was thrilled to explore their farm and interact with the animals. However, we encountered an unexpected situation. They had a bottle calf, but they wouldn't allow our 9-year-old to participate in bottle feeding it. They insisted that their teenage son would handle the task once he returned home. They made it seem like a big deal, as if only their son was capable of taking care of the calf. I've had experience raising bottle calves throughout my life, and I simply couldn't comprehend their reasoning. While we don't currently own cows, we are familiar with farm life, and I would have gladly let visitors interact with and feed any of our animals without hesitation. I've always been enthusiastic about introducing children to the world of agriculture, so this was truly disappointing for me. However, it's important to note that entitlement should not come into play here. Just because you want your child to experience something doesn't mean others are obligated to fulfill that desire. No one owes you an explanation as to why they have certain rules regarding their own property and animals. In fact, there could be numerous valid reasons why they preferred their own teenage son to feed the calf instead of allowing a visiting child to do so. It's essential to respect their decision and understand that they have their own considerations and concerns.